All right, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on this beautiful planet Earth. This is your host, Rebecca Jernigan, and you're listening to Journeys with Rebecca right here on wolfspiritradio.com and also being heard on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com Studio B. Please remember that both Wolf Spirit Radio and Freedom Slips are listener supported, so every bit that you can help with is just absolutely fabulous. It helps to keep the stations on track so that the show's host and their guests can come forward and bring all this information and education to everyone concerned. So thank you, and I'm glad everyone is here tonight, and I'm very glad to be back tonight. Tonight's show was actually supposed to be last week's show, but I did want to tell you what happened is I have this skin condition that came up, and it actually caused my eyes to swell shut, so I couldn't see. So I am still working on a little bit of a swollen right eye, but I'm way better than it was. So I'm glad to be here. So this week's show was supposed to be last week's show, and I hope you'll enjoy it. In the updates I gave to everybody, if you follow the newsletter, and if you don't, please go to my website and do sign up for that, because it does give you all the information on everything that's going on, or my Twitter account, that too, or the Facebook account. There's 3 ways that you can get the information. But tonight is about it's over 70-year-old prophecy. It's by an obscure man. I've never heard of him, and maybe after we get started, you guys might have. This is going to be a real interesting show. I've brought Tobias here with me tonight so that we can kind of go back and forth on this. And this article that I found on this 70-year-old prophecy is quite lengthy. So during the process of this, I've read it over 3 or 4 times, and I wanted to kind of paraphrase it. And every time I tried to paraphrase it, it would take the information out of context. So I'm going to read the entire article when I get to that point tonight, and I will be stopping during points of it so that we can kind of talk back and forth about it. We will be taking questions tonight. If you do have them, please place them in all caps. And I've got more to say on that, but I want to get back to some other announcements and some other conversations that I want to have tonight with you guys. First of all, thank you all for being here. I feel very blessed to have everyone listening in tonight. I think you're going to enjoy this show. It's a little different than what I've ever done before. I did announce a few weeks ago that after May of this year, I would not be taking any new reading clients. Well, I've had so many requests for them, I have decided that I will wait to the end of July to phase out any new clients. So if you are interested in a reading or any other services that I provide, that would put you on a client list. And that means then I would be available for consultations no matter what that is. So if you want to do that, then please go to the website again. It's journeyswithrebecca.com. I do have 1 opening left for the mentorship program. I do have payment plans for those that cannot afford all of it at once. That works. And also as a reminder to help support me by supporting my book, Night Experiences, Visions and Prophecies. It's available both in Kindle and print version. So if you haven't already got it, please do. I will tell you that this book is more than just sharing the experiences that I've had through the years. My illustrator that I have has brought this to life. And as you read the pages and you read the words on the pages, she has captured the energy and the meanings and the vibration, so to speak, of what was going on in the particular vision, prophecy, or night experience, depending on what it was categorized as. So as you read it, it becomes an experience that you yourself can absolutely feel. There's a lot of energy behind these books. My second one is about 3/4 done. I've sent the first half of the book to my illustrator, so she's working on that now. So that one will be coming out, and then before the end of the year, the next book will be coming out. It'll be the Tools and Tips book, as well as some other things. The other thing I want to mention is that I will be putting some classes as video classes on my website, and those will be available on demand for people. Now, I am still working on some equipment. I'm still working on trying to get some things. So if you have the kind of the notion or the feeling that you could assist and you would like to donate, donations are always welcome for sure. Again, a very interesting show tonight.
Captain, right.
I hope that you will enjoy it, but before we go into that, I want to welcome Tobias to the show. Tobias, hello, good evening.
Hello, good evening, Rebecca, and hello everybody. It's great to be here. How are you?
I'm well. I feel better that I was able to get this show. I felt really bad. I couldn't do the show last week, but I couldn't read, so I was like,
right.
Yeah, like, okay, I don't know how people do that.
Well, it's kind of hard without your eyes or your lips to do a show, even radio, right?
Yeah, exactly. You have to have both of them usually. Usually it works that way. Anyway, Tobias, you and I have been kind of chatting about it, and I want to tell everyone, Tobias I didn't even give him this information. He doesn't even have it. So he's not heard this before either. So again, this is just one of those really interesting things that came across my email, that it was a link that was in one of the emails from some people that I get stuff from, and I was reading it and I was like, oh my gosh, that's just exactly what's going on now. And it's really going to be cool. So we're going to have a lot of conversations. So again, if you do have questions tonight, please make sure that you put them in all caps in the chat room. We will get to them, because that's part of it. Whether it pertains to this or just whatever's going on in your life, we'll be happy to answer those for you tonight. So it's going to be fun. And so Tobias, before I get started, is there anything that you'd like to share or say before we do this?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this as well. And I think, one of the bigger reasons for my excitement is that it's weird, wacky, strange, and interesting. And that may sound sort of benign on the surface, but the fact is when we discuss anything outside the realms of what, many people consider normal, we're actually pushing the limits of our own consciousness outside that box that they created for us. So, as strange as it may be, as interesting, or as much as we might agree or disagree with certain information, I think it's all part of the action of actually stretching our minds, and I think it's fantastic, beyond the fact that I believe tonight there's going to be a lot of very real connections between these prophecies that you've described and what's happening, as you said. So, yeah, I think it's really cool. Let's open our minds and go with it and see what happens.
Yes, absolutely. So with that in mind, I want to prepare everyone. This was written over 70 years ago. So over 70 years ago, the environment and social structure, things like that in the world is very different than it is today. So I don't want anyone to get caught up in the verbiage. I want you all to really think about what's actually being expressed on a much deeper, more profound level. Because there may be things in here that you may not agree with, in as much as it might have religious connotations to it that you may not agree with, but it's the overall message and information that was brought forward over 70 years ago that's so absolutely profound. I found it rather moving myself when I read it, so I'm going to kick this off and get it going. And the very beginning of this, it says it's a 70-year-old prophecy. The earth will soon be swept by extraordinary rapid waves of cosmic electricity. Now, this was posted in a place called the Event Chronicle. This prophecy was written 70 years ago, and it is absolutely mind-blowing. And I don't know if I can pronounce this man's name, but his name is Peter Konstantinov, and his last name I could not even begin, but he's also known as Binsa Duno, born in 1886, and who later passed away in 1944. He left a prophecy that he had obtained through a trance-based state. The prophecy was therefore dated as 1944, a few days before his death in December of that year. This prophecy by Peter fits right into the times we are going through right now in relation to the shift consciousness, the earth changes, and our golden age. Back then, Peter was aware and taught that we were moving into the age of Aquarius as per the astrological age system. Here's the prophecy. During the passage of time, the consciousness of man traversed a very long period of obscurity. This phase, which the Hindus called Kali Yuga, is on the verge of ending. We find ourselves today at the frontier between two epochs, that of Kali Yuga and that of the new era that we are entering. A gradual improvement is already occurring in the thoughts, sentiments, and acts of human. But everybody will soon be subjugated to divine fire that will purify and prepare them in regards to the new era. Thus, man will raise himself to a superior degree of consciousness, indispensable to his entrance to the new life. That is what one understands by ascension. Some decades will pass before the fire will come that will transform the world by bringing it a new moral. This immense wave comes from the cosmic space and will inundate the entire earth. All those that attempt to oppose it will be carried off and transferred elsewhere. Although the inhabitants of this planet do not find themselves at the same degree of evolution, the new wave will be felt by each one of us. And this transformation will not only touch the earth, but the ensemble of the entire cosmos. Wow. Already. Wow. And we're not even a quarter way through it. Yeah. Okay, so let's continue. The best and the only thing that man can do now is to turn towards God and improve himself consciously, to elevate his vibratory level so as to find himself in harmony with a powerful wave that will soon submerge him. The fire of which I speak that accompanies the new conditions offered to our planet will rejuvenate, purify, reconstruct everything. The matter will be refined, your hearts will be liberated from anguish, troubles, incertitude, and they will become luminous. Everything will be improved, elevated. The thoughts, sentiments, and negative acts will be consumed and destroyed. Your present life is a slavery, a heavy prison. Understand your situation and liberate yourself from it. I tell you this, exit from your prison. It is really sorry to see so much misleading, so much suffering, so much incapacity to understand where one's true happiness lies. Whew. Everything that is around you will soon collapse and disappear. Nothing will be left of the civilization nor its perversity. The entire earth will be shaken and no trace will be left of the erroneous culture that maintains men under the yoke of ignorance. Earthquakes are not only mechanical phenomena, their goal is also to awaken the intellect and the heart of humans, so that they liberate themselves from their errors and their follies, and that they understand that they are not the only ones in the universe. Our solar system is now traversing a region of the cosmos where the constellation that was destroyed left its mark, its dust. This crossing of contaminated space is a source of poisoning, not only for the inhabitants of the earth, but for all the inhabitants of all the other planets of our galaxy. Only the suns are not affected by the influence of this hostile environment. This region is called the 13th zone. One also calls it the zone of contradictions. Our planet was enclosed in this region for thousands of years, but finally we are approaching the exit of this space of darkness, and we are on the point of attaining a more spiritual region where more evolved beings live. Okay, take a breath. Everybody take that in for a moment. It gets better.
Wow.
The earth is now following an ascended movement, and everyone should force themselves to harmonize with the currents of this ascension. Those who refuse to subjugate themselves to this orientation will lose the advantage of good conditions that are offered in the future to elevate themselves. They will remain behind in evolution and must wait tens of millions of years for the coming of the new ascending wave. The earth, the solar system, the universe are all being put in a new direction under the impulsion of love. Most of you still consider love as a decisory force, but in reality, it is the greatest of all forces. Money and power continue to be venerated as it as if the course of your life depended upon it. In the future, all will be subjugated to love, and all will serve through it. But it's through suffering and difficulties that the consciousness of man will be awakened. The terrible predictions of the prophet Daniel written in the Bible relate to the epoch that is opening. There will be floods, hurricanes, giant fires, and earthquakes that will sweep away everything. Blood will flow in abundance. There will be revolutions. Terrible explosions will resound in numerous regions of the earth. There where there is earth, water will come. And there where there is water, earth will come. God is love. Yet we are dealing here with chastisement, a reply by nature against the crimes perpetrated by man since the right night of the time against his mother, the earth. All these sufferings, those that will be saved, the elite will know the golden age, harmony and unlimited beauty. Thus, keep your peace and your faith when the time comes for suffering and terror, because it is written that not a hair will fall from the head of the just. Don't be discouraged. Simply follow your work of personal perfection. You have no idea of the grandiose future that awaits you. A new earth will soon see day. In a few decades, the work will be less exacting, and each one will have time to consecrate spiritual, intellectual, and artistic activities. The question of rapport between man and woman will finally be resolved in harmony, each one having the possibility of following their aspirations. The relations of couples will be founded on reciprocal respect and esteem. Humans will voyage through the different planes of space and break through intergalactic space. They will study their functioning and will rapidly be able to know the divine world, to fusion with the head of the universe. A lot of strange language in there. Okay. The new era is that of the sixth race. Your predestination is to prepare yourself for it, to welcome it, and to love it, and to live it. The sixth race will build itself around the idea of fraternity. There will be no more conflicts of personal interest. The single aspiration each one will be to conform himself to the law of love. The sixth race will be that of love. A new continent will be formed for it. It will emerge from the Pacific, so that the Most High can establish his place here on this planet. The founders of this new civilization, I call them the brothers of humanity, or also children of love. They will be unshakable for the good, and they will represent a new type of man. Men will form a family as a large body, and each people will represent an organ in this body. In this new race, love will manifest in such a perfect manner that today's man can only have a vague idea. The earth will remain a terrain favorable to struggle, but the forces of darkness will retreat, and the earth will be liberated from them. Humans, seeing that there is no other path, will engage themselves to the path of the new life, that of salvation. In their senseless pride, some will, to the end, and hope to continue on earth a life that the divine order condemns. But each one will finish by understanding that the direction of the world doesn't belong to them. A new culture will see the light of day. It will rest upon three principal foundations: the elevation of woman, the elevation of the meek and humble, and the protection of the rights of man. The light, the good, and justice will triumph. It's just a question of time. The regions should be purified. The religion should be purified. Each contains a particle of the teaching of the masters of the light, but obscured by the incessant supply of human deviation. All the believers who will have to unite and put themselves in agreement with one principle, that of placing love as the base of all belief, whatever it may be. love and fraternity that is the common base. The earth will soon be swept by extraordinary rapid waves of cosmic electricity. A few decades from now, beings who are bad and lead others astray will not be able to support their intensity. They will thus be absorbed by the cosmic fire that will consume the bad that they possess. Then they will repent, because it is written that each flesh shall glorify God. Our Mother the Earth will get rid of men that do not accept the new life. She will reject them like damaged fruit. They will soon not be able to reincarnate on this planet, criminals included. Only those that possess love in them will remain. There is not any place on earth that is not dried with human or animal blood. She must therefore submit to purification. And it is for this that certain continents will be immersed while others will surface. Men do not suspect to what dangers they are menaced by. They continue to pursue futile objectives and seek pleasure. On the contrary, those of the sixth race will be conscious of the dignity of their role and respectful of each one's liberty. They will nourish themselves exclusively from products of the vegetal realm. Their ideas will have the power to circulate freely as the air and light of our days. In the words, if you are not born again, apply to the sixth race. Read chapter 60 of Isaiah. It relates to the coming of the sixth race, the race of love. After the tribulations, men will cease to sin and will find again the path of virtue. The climate of our planet will be moderated everywhere, and brutal variations will no longer exist. The air will once again become pure, the same for water. The parasites will disappear. Men will remember their previous incarnations, and they will feel the pleasure of noticing that they are finally liberated from their previous condition. In the same manner that one gets rid of parasites and dead leaves on the vine, so act the evolved beings to prepare men to serve the God of love. They give to them good conditions to grow and to develop themselves. And to those that want to listen to them, they say, do not be afraid. Still a little more time and everything will be all right. You are on a good path. May he that wants to enter the new culture study consciously work and prepare. Thanks to the idea of fraternity, the earth will become a blessed place, and that will not wait. But before great sufferings will be sent to awaken the consciousness, sins accumulated for thousands of years must be redeemed. The ardent wave emanating from the on high will contribute in liquidating the karma of its peoples. The liberation can no longer be postponed. Humanity must be prepared for itself for great trials that are inescapable and coming to bring an end to egoism. Under the earth, something extraordinary is preparing itself. A revolution that is grandiose and completely inconceivable that will manifest soon in nature. God has decided to redress the earth, and he will do it. It is the end of an epoch. A new order will substitute the old, an order in which love will reign on earth. And so it is. Wow. You there? Are you there?
I am totally here. That is some stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, from over 70 years ago.
Interesting.
You know, like I said, some of the verbiage and stuff was just, you know, a little different. But isn't it like so similar to what we've all been hearing about for the past 10, 15, 20 years? Well, you know, for some people more than that, but I mean, this was a man that I'd never heard of before. It wasn't like he was, you know, he was in some level of notoriety, right? Mm-hmm. And here he is talking about this cosmic wave of electricity coming, and he used the word suns. He used a plural of the word suns, more than one. I thought that was interesting.
Yes.
Wow. So, yeah. I wonder how. Go ahead.
It blows me away because, you know, we've all had so many stories from the time we were born to, like you referred to, the last 10 or 15 years about prophecies and belief systems within religions, outside of religions, and the sort of New Age philosophies, and the guru here and the guru there, and we've heard all of these different schools of thought, and it really comes back to trying to pin down. It comes back to everything. It comes back to the very nature of reality itself, our lives, how we've been created, like how does this all work? And it reflects back on something that you and I have both repeated for years, and that is that how do we know where we're going if we don't know where we've come from, right?
Exactly.
So it really fascinates me because they're talking about different energies. They're talking about things that, within the paradigm, so to speak, that affect consciousness, that affect the physical reality, the earth, the bodies, the people, all of these things. And for months and years, you and I have been talking about the quantum levels, whether it's, psychic phenomenon or so-called supernatural phenomenon, or the things that you and I do in our work and in personal lives, or the technologies that some of us use, the quantum technologies, the matrix, the construct, as you've written about, and the Elohim have talked about extensively in your first book, or your earlier book, I should say. It wasn't your first book. All of these things come sort of full circle when we can see this person here, 70, 80, 100 years ago, prophesying things that obviously are related to the same thing. You referred to the fact that he mentioned sons plural. My God, that's fascinating to me, because you and I, just had a conversation recently with some incredible people whom I questioned about what is the sons plural? What is the central sun? I've heard this perception, this talk of a central sun through different stories over the years, and I never really knew what it was. So, I mean, it sort of clicks again. That's just one component of this prophecy that you've just read here that clicks into place. And not only that, but it goes another level. It says, okay, there's literally energies that emanate from this central sun, or these suns, or the galactic, I guess he was referring to it as. And I mean, it just comes full circle when it comes to the creative energies that make things manifest. So if we're talking about our health and the well-being of the earth and changes environmentally and all of these things, they parlay into so many different historical stories over the decades and centuries and eons and eons of time from the past. So it bears some consideration, doesn't it?
Absolutely. There was a ton of parts in there and as I remember them, so I'll be taking it out of order here, but he talked about new lands coming from, he's talking about the Pacific. Well, we're watching a new landmass being grown even as we sit here talking tonight, and that's from the eruption of the volcano.
Yes.
It's still spitting out lava, and where does that go? It's sitting on the surface. It's creating literally a new island in the Pacific.
Wow, that's crazy, isn't it?
So that's, I was like looking at it, I was like, well, that speaks to now. That speaks to what's actually happening right in this moment.
And even the descriptions of, this, Kali Yuga, Aquarian Age.
I've heard of all that, yep.
All of it, like the golden age, it reminds me, obviously, it reminds us of the stories and of the very real Lemuria and Atlantis, because everybody talks about that, saying, look, it was a golden age, technology, love, culture, visitors from other planets, people from different species, like all of these things, culminating in like a perfect era. Until, of course, the tragic wars and different things that continue that story. However, the point is, it sounds like a return to something that's, akin to paradise, is it not?
Yeah. And I can tell you, I know what paradise feels like. I've tripped back there. So, I like the idea that here it is over 70 years ago, and he's talking about that we're going to be an intergalactic species, that we're going to be amongst the rest of them in the universe. He talked about us being space travelers, basically, and I absolutely love that. And I was like, here's some over 70 years ago. Well, we hadn't perfected, going to the moon or anything at that point, right? None of that stuff had actually happened, at least not in our, public. Yes, information. Thank you. I lost that word. It just went right out. The other thing that I wanted to touch base with too is the idea that he said that karma was going to be washed away. And what have we been saying? I mean, and not just us. There's many people out there. We're all getting these messages, and I just love that. And that's the other thing he said. There's going to be people bringing all pieces, and it's all okay. And that's what I've been talking about. We all are carriers of pieces of the puzzle, no matter what our alignment is. Like when I was reading this article, obviously there was Christian overtones, but there was also Hindu overtones. There was also Asian overtones. There was also Jewish overtones. And this is from, somebody that was in some kind of a trance that was spewing information that would certainly would touch, no matter what your belief system was. It would touch on that. And the fact that, the karma is going to be washed away. We've heard that in the now time. Is like you don't have to spend years. It used to be you had to spend years, months at the very least, working on purging yourself, purging your body and your system and everything of all the karma that you've accumulated. And you can't get rid of all of it. You didn't know it. But in this way, they're saying is that, hey, he's saying, this wave's coming in and it's just going to release it. And now we know we're in a really high area, high time, a high energy level. And the wave hasn't even hit us. The crescendo of that wave hasn't even hit us yet. We're just on the fringes of it. It's just now coming through, right? But we haven't reached the height of it yet. Getting rid of our karma is just going to wash it away. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I've thought about these things from a different level. How do you feel as an individual being free of those burdens that you didn't even know you were carrying? I wonder how that would feel. Can you imagine how much lighter that you would feel? How more expansive your consciousness could be when it's not fettered and tethered with junk, with stuff? I mean, it's amazing. He talks about the word purification by fire. I think that's so fascinating because, I mean, again, that has many different connotations, religious connotations, cultic connotations, supernatural connotations, all of these things. However, it's to me, from my perspective, it's fascinating. It makes perfect sense because as I alluded to earlier, we've been talking about the quantum level of things, the quantum level, everything from the so-called construct or matrix to the quantum technologies that I use every day. You've experienced, you use different types of quantum, consciousness and access. These are things like, we're talking science here. We're not just going woo-woo. We're not going at all woo-woo. We're talking about things that have a very real, readable, I hate to use the word scientific, but you know what I mean, like a real effect on people's mind and their physical form. It has an effect on the body. So, I mean, we've talked for months and years about sending signals from a quantum device through the chi field that has different harmonics, that has different energies, specific energies that have been scanned in through a laboratory, resonant frequencies, and then sending those signals to people remotely or, whoever you connect it to. How is that, I ask, any different than talking about purification through fire or energies or signals from, for example, a sun or a galactic? To me, they're talking about exactly the same thing. So if it's challenging, I know it's challenging for some of us to wrap our minds around this because it sounds like some sort of science fiction or some sort of things that trigger us. I mean, even the word karma, even the word sin, I mean, those are trigger words. But if we look at it realistically, we're talking about states of being.
We're talking
Right.
about states of being.
Right, not a judgment. You're absolutely right. Yeah,
exactly.
Good point.
So I can totally see that, you know, I mean, seriously, understanding the quantum on the level that I understand it and that you and I work with it, and other people around the world. There's many people that work with the quantum equipment and machines and quantum consciousness, subconscious workings. I mean, it totally makes sense to me from a bigger level. That the cosmos itself is one big, and you know I've said this many times, the cosmos is one big quantum energy device that creates changes, effects, and physical realities in our environment and our world and galaxy and beyond. This is the creation of reality. So it's constantly ebbing and flowing. So as woo-woo as it may sound in certain context to talk about energies, you know, ascension, there's another word that totally triggers me.
Yeah, and he spoke that right in the very beginning. You talked about ascension right from the very beginning. First paragraph, I think.
Exactly. Every time I hear that word, I want to, you know, bite my tongue to stop saying, you know, weird little funny words. I mean, honestly, it still makes sense to me in a different context. It means, you know, an elevated state of being. Right. I can give another example, and again, I'm sure we've talked about this dozens of times in different shows over the years. I mean, think of some of the equipment I use, the energy equipment, chi machines, orgone generators. They have functions on some of them that will you literally turn a switch and it will change the brain wave that you're experiencing to give you focus, to give you relaxation, to give you a better meditative state. You know, it's recorded in hertz frequencies, and it's a science.
Yep.
I've experienced that for years. I use it around the world with people. I mean, when you can change the way your brain waves are, you are changing your perceptions and your emotions and your focus. You're enhancing yourself. Of course, it can be used for negative states, but we won't even go there. That's not what we use it for. So when we're talking about cosmic waves or energies or purifications, all of these things, perfect sense it makes to me. Perfect sense. Again, this is the quantum level. I've experienced it, forever, like through thousands of different experiences. And people do use these technologies that themselves, but again, this is talking about the technology of reality and the cosmos and creation. So yeah, man, I can totally jive with this. I think it's fascinating.
I do too, and I want to, before I forget, I also want to let people know who are listening out there, if you want a copy of this, I would be happy to email you the article just as I received it. You just simply have to write me at journeyswithrebecca@yahoo.com, and in the subject line put article, and I will send it back to you as a Word document, because that's what I have it in, as an attachment. So if you're interested in this article for yourself, I'd be happy to share it with anybody. All you have to do is email me, journeyswithrebecca@yahoo.com, and put article in the subject line. I just didn't speak a lot about it beforehand because when I first opened it up, and what grabbed me, of course, was a 70-year-old prophecy. That was the headlines, right? I was like, okay, so, you know, what's this about, right? And then I read it. And I was mesmerized. And, you know, again, not getting caught up in the verbiage so much, because the verbiage is from over 70 years ago. They use different words, but yet I was surprised by some of the words that we're using now that was also in this article. I thought, well, now that's, you know, pretty forward thinking, 70 some years ago, you know, as far as some of the way it was written. I just found it really fascinating. So it's something that you guys can have and read it over, because I know I read it. I tried to read it slowly, and I tried to take enough small little breaks in there so you could absorb it. But again, I've read it 3 or 4 times now, and I'm still gathering information. And the 6th race, I want to talk about that, but before I do, I do want to share with people, please, 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 if you have questions, if you have input of any kind that you would like to have tonight, this is the night to do that. This is absolutely a perfect night for us to answer questions. We'd love to do that, or to get into some topics that would be of interest to you. As much as, this whole article opened up like all kinds of avenues. Just have to use your imagination. I'm telling you, it's crazy, but it was really good. So now I lost my train of thought. Well, what did I say I was going to talk about? Yeah. I can't remember. You remember what I was going to say? No, of course you don't.
I totally,
not in my head.
Yeah. I'm not in your head at this moment. I could have been. No, I'm just bugging you.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, again, the semantics of it. And again, as I was reading it, and I get a little bit more every time I read it, again, the correlation with the different kind of cultures, whether it be religious or, like I said, Hinduism or whatever. I just found that really fascinating, especially from, all those years ago. Again, very, very progressive article, and again, put into a trance. And I've never heard of this person at all. I've not seen anything else from him. I have no idea, what his background is or anything, but that is something I will be looking up just because I want to see if there was anything else that he has contributed. But sixth race, that's what I was going to get to.
That's what it was, yeah.
Yep. The sixth race. Now, that's like one of those little foggy things in the back of my mind. I know I've had conversations with somebody or a few people about the sixth race. Let's go back to the late 80s, early 90s. There was a big push on what they called indigo children. Do you remember that? Yeah. Okay. That's where I heard a conversation. Somebody was talking about the indigo children, and their idea at that time was that the indigo children were the sixth race. But the magnanimous changes that should have followed, right, by bringing in all these indigo children, did not follow to, the predictions, so to speak, or to the prophecies, however you want to word that. So then we had the crystal children, and now those are the big ones, the crystalline children. Again, we're not seeing like such a huge influx that we're getting more. By the way, we are getting more. Each generation that comes along, there's more children that are born that are more enlightened than even we were and the ones previous to us, et cetera, and so forth. Because that's the age that we're moving into, this age of Aquarius or the new age, the golden age, whatever you want to call it. I mean, there's so many different things that it can be termed as. And again, I think it just depends on what you're aligned with as to what feels right to you to call this. But certainly there is something happening. There's just too many things happening for people, too much awareness, too much consciousness, not too much in that's more than what you can handle. It's just that there's the frequency is there of people reporting to me all their different experiences. Even my clients that come to me, whether they're there for a reading or a session for something else, or they're part of my mentorship program, whatever it is, I have watched how they have just absolutely, like, one time I speak to them, the next time I speak to them, they've had this huge opening. You just in the way they talk, the way they feel, it shifts the energy, it shifts people's, being. Seriously. This consciousness wave that's here. And so the sixth race, I'm not as familiar with it in the biblical terms. I've read the Bible a few times, off and on, and I don't retain much of it. I think it's just because it's extremely heavy reading, number one. And number two is that it doesn't flow well as far as some of the stuff that comes out of it for me personally. I have nothing against the Bible at all. I'm not saying that. It's just that it's not an easy read for me personally. But I have heard about the sixth race. And I always wondered if that was like going to be like a huge influx of people being born, or is the sixth race born out of those that are here? Because obviously if you've got infants, and this wave hits its crescendo, as infants, they can't teach anybody much of anything yet. They haven't learned to walk or talk much or, do any of that. So I've always wondered if the sixth race wasn't kind of like a gathering, so to speak, of those who vibrate in a certain way, have achieved a certain level of consciousness, if they're off-planet beings, or if they're, instead of reincarnating, they're ascending upon the planet. There's a lot of conjecture there, and I don't know. What do you think about all that? And I'd be interested in hearing what somebody else out there, too, might think about the sixth race concept.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, even that harkens back to what we were discussing a little while ago about frequencies. I mean, there's another sort of woo-woo word, right? There's another word that triggers me when people say, "Oh, you're on my frequency or this frequency," it drives me, Tobias bananas. But at the same time, if I translate that over to the science, and again, I'm talking quantum science, not this BS that they say is science and in part of the mainstream, I understand the frequency. I mean, probably most of the listeners have some experiences and knowledge with frequencies when it comes to being in a person's electromagnetic field. Our brain waves actually do alter when we come into different fields, such as those of other people, groups, things such as that. So, I mean, it totally makes sense to me talking about the sixth
race.
The sixth race. I mean, when you're saying that, when you're describing that, I actually could imagine in my head, different children being born, and it reminded me of, as you were alluding to, the crystal children, the indigos, just different people, different groups. If there's enough of something that's different frequency-wise, of course it's going to have an effect on the environment around it and the people within that environment. And again, I'm saying that from a purely scientific standpoint. It's just the way it works. So is it possible that, a group of people can change the way someone else or another group feels? Well, absolutely. It happens every single day. So, yeah, I mean, as woo as it may sound, it also makes some perfect sense when you look at it. It's really about perspective. And again, just, I sort of want to take this opportunity to say that, I mean, some of the ways that you and I describe things, Rebecca, we're really trying to keep it within sort of a grounded perspective without sounding too out there, even at the same time as we're talking about things that are extraordinarily out there. We just have to sort of assimilate things ourselves and put it into context and put it into perspective. We always have to try to remember and not to let these things trigger us. That's funny, me saying that after telling you all of these words. They constantly trigger me, from karma to sin to, cosmic waves and frequencies. They all trigger me. But at the same time, let's turn those triggers into, bells that ding above our head or flags or lights that flash saying, "Oh, this triggers me. Let me recontextualize it." Is that a word? Recontextualize.
Why not? You just made it up. I have a language all of my own. When I was raising my kids, I used to say I was going to build a dictionary, and it was filled with all the words that I made up. And I like it. It works for me.
It would probably make more sense than English.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
But anyways, we have to remind ourselves to look at these things. If we feel something, or something, perturbs us or puts us off balance, we're like, "Oh, forget that." That's really, that's really a good reason to look at it, because from the very beginning, even before you read this prophecy tonight, you spoke of the fact that, look, this is contextual within its time. So, they have certain views, they have different personalities, they have a different world environment, from religion to society, to architecture even, like everything's different, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
We can't allow ourselves to discard it, to throw it out because it triggers us with some of their phonetics or some of their, their verbiage. So yeah, I think it's fascinating to look at things like this because there's a lot of gold and gems within it, especially when we can make those connections to other things.
Absolutely. So here there is a seventh race I hear now to awake the people. And we are going to go to break here in just a minute, and that's from Rayro 77. I will talk about that when we come back, because that's another thing that I wanted to tie in was this seventh race, sixth race, and also the Mayan calendar. I know that doesn't seem like they go together, but I'll link it up, and we'll see if we can come up with something. And you know, I'm all for trying to figure it out. And I just don't think any one of us have all the answers. I just don't. But I think when we put enough of our heads together, we can kind of figure it out. But I want to talk a little bit about language for just a moment. Like some of the words that you said trigger you is frequency and cosmic wave, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And that's the language that we have now. And once we get more awakened, I guess, I don't know, once we reach a different level, perhaps, I don't even know how to word that, but in a different space, maybe we'll have different verbiage that will fit. But right now, that language is what we have to work with so that it's understandable to people, and including ourselves. Because if you made up a word to represent frequency, people wouldn't know what you were talking about.
It actually reminds me of some of the things that, you know, in the past I imagine I've heard different stories about people, their concept of electricity running through a wire freaked them out. They thought it was voodoo or black magic or something.
I mean, there you go, right.
It's exactly. Like, it's like the stories of the cavemen or whoever was really back then, seeing flame for the first time from a match or something, you know. It's like, it's just out of context to them. It's some sort of a thing that's very different than the actual what it is. So.
Absolutely. So we're almost ready for the break here. So when we come back at the top of the hour, we're going to get into the seventh race and the sixth race. And while we're on break, if you guys can think of any more questions, please do send them in. I would love just to have this as being an open format, and that we can all just kind of have this discussion, because I think we're helping each other. And remember, if you'd like a copy of that prophecy, I'd be happy to email it, journeyswithrebecca@yahoo.com, and put in article at the subject line, and I will be happy to email that to you. And if you're listening to this after the fact and not a live show, I will still do that if you send me the email. Doesn't matter. There's no time constraint on that. And we're going to be talking a little bit about the Arcturians a little bit when we come back as well towards the end of the second hour. We have some projects that Tobias and I have been working on. So for the rest of you, if you will, just stay put here for a few more moments. We are going to go to break, and we are going to be back at the top of the hour with more of Journeys with Rebecca and Tobias right here on Wolf Spirit Radio, and also at freedomslips.com Studio B. So stay with us. All right, everyone, welcome back, and you're listening to Journeys with Rebecca right here on Wolf Spirit Radio, and also being heard on Revolution Radio at Freedom Slips Studio B. Please remember, if you can donate, that would be great to any of the stations. Every little bit helps support the guests and the hosts, as well as the radio stations, to keep up with the equipment so that they can bring you these broadcasts. So, back to our show for tonight. It started out with the 70-year-old prophecy for those of you who are just tuning in. And again, I'm going to make the offer. I've got a few people that have already written me. I've checked my email, and I'll get those out after the show, that have written me to get the article. The article, you need to email me at journeyswithrebecca@yahoo.com, put article in the subject line, and I will reply back, and I will drop it in as a Word document attachment. If you have trouble opening it, let me know, and then I can copy and paste it into an email and send it to you that way. Not everybody has the same kind of computer equipment or the same versions of the Word and all of that, so do know that technology sometimes gets in the way. But I urge anybody that would like to keep a copy of it, because it is really quite astounding, thinking back, all those years ago. It was published 2 days before he died, but when did it actually happen? I mean, he was born in 1886, so anytime between 1886 and 1944, that article could have been done. The trance session could have been done. So we don't really know, but we do know that it's over 70 years old. So I think it's really fascinating because it does speak to our modern times. And the interesting thing is that it's exactly what we're going into right now. Is exactly what we've been experiencing for quite a few years. But we're really reaching a crescendo in it, where more and more people are really, beginning to, I guess the word I want to use is really own that this is actually happening. They can see the changes that's going on in their own space, in their own environment, and their own being. So back to, what we left off with on the first hour, which was, in this prophecy, they were talking about the sixth race, and Ray Rowe wrote, I hear it's the seventh race is now to wake the people. And then, Tracy writes in, we are the sixth race. Doesn't matter if people know it's happening, each to their own speed. And one of the kind of conjectures I made was that, the sixth race, is not just a generation, not just like, one generation. I think it comes from a myriad of generations. Because there's more and more people being born that are more aware now than they were, especially in the times when I was born. I was in one of the baby boomers. I'm part of the baby boomer generation. That speaks to how old I am. Maybe I shouldn't say that.
Yeah, baby. Yeah, baby.
In any case, I believe that people that, cause I know a lot of people that are just really, their vibrations, their essence is really up there. And, and I don't know all the people, right? So I don't know who I don't know. So I can just well imagine with just what little bit I do know. I believe that maybe that would be right, that Tracy says that the sixth race is already here. I think I have to agree with that. And I do believe that the seventh race, is also ascending upon this planet. And let's go back into the thing I was talking about, which is the Mayan calendar. And they talk about it, being the 5 count. And, now, there's a couple of different ways that people are putting this, so I'm not making this statement as definitive. Some people believe from the Mayan calendar that the fifth cycle was the one that we just came out of from 2012, that's when that fifth cycle calendar ended. And that the new long count calendar is beginning, which would then tie into the sixth, count, if that's how that works. I haven't studied the Mayan calendar enough to really know to speak well on it, so I'm just making suppositions here. So, but if that's the case, and that ties in with the sixth race, the seventh race, and the time frame that we're in, the time being that we are currently experiencing as the shift. It's the great shift. And that's kind of how I more or less kind of mold that into my understanding, because if you go back to the premise, and this guy said it in his prophecy as well, that there's people out there that everyone's got a piece of the puzzle. There's many that's got pieces of the puzzle. And there's no one religion, there's no one way of belief, only that you have love in your heart, and that's what you are for, is love. And so I agree with that just tremendously. So now, getting back to all of these races, they're the hairbringers, if you will, or harbingers of change. They carry a higher frequency. There's that word triggering you.
Totally.
They carry a higher, I know, it's okay. They carry a higher vibration, and maybe they didn't start out that way, but as they grew more consciously aware, and I'd like part of some of that, cause I work at it daily. I truly do. Raising my own vibration, raising my own energy, and raising my own consciousness. Because there's just so much out there. I mean, I think about all of these things that we haven't yet experienced, and how absolutely awesome of a time that we live in. I mean, yes, of course it's very chaotic. And again, the prophecy spoke to that. And I like the fact that we call them the cabal. I like to call them the 1%. And I think he called them the elitists, didn't he? Isn't that what he called them? The elite?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he called him the elite. We're talking about the same thing. Again, semantics, it's verbiage, it speaks to the time, but we're all kind of talking the same language there. So in any case, I kind of believe that perhaps that maybe all the races that we're talking about that's been prophesied, I believe they're here. Now the seventh race, I actually haven't heard about, Ray, but that doesn't mean that it's not existing. So I'm going to do a little bit of research on that myself because I think that's fascinating. Because if the sixth race is already here, then the sixth race is the one that's bringing in the energy, so to speak. They're kind of the way holders, and the way showers of what's going to be happening on this planet to all of humanity.
It's always so much fun, talking about these things because, again, I mean, not to sound like a broken record, but going back to the energies, I just, as you're talking and I'm sort of absorbing everything, I try to perceive outside of my box, for example, and perceive different people's perspectives on these words, on these subjects, and it's fascinating to me because so many people, when you say the word energy, they will be completely lost. They won't have a clue what you're talking about, and yet there's other segments of the listeners and experiencers and our world and population, our friends and people that absolutely get what this means. The vibe, it means the consciousness, the way you can focus or not focus. It's everything is energy, right? So that's, again, just listening to what you're saying there, Rebecca, is so much fun for me because of my very own perspective, which, of course, we talked about in the first hour, and that is coming from a quantum understanding. Energy, vibe, the changes, like these are very real things. And I mean, it's just part of my job to sort of pull in that foundation again. It's what, everybody knows me, for pulling in that foundation because I've always been one of the biggest, inquisitors, one of the biggest skeptics when it comes to certain words and triggers and subjects. I want to grasp it and understand it from different perspectives. So yeah, I totally get it. I think tonight already, it's absolutely fascinating, just our perception and our conversation about perspectives and verbiage and different things, because we're really pulling it together in a bigger picture kind of way over different time periods. And of course, when we talk about prophecies or we talk about, stories of old, or we talk about certain teachings or schools of thought, these are all from different time periods. And it's just so important to sort of try to pull the strings, the common thread together between them and through them so that we don't throw anything out, so that we can actually take the value out of what has value within each story and make those connections. So yeah, this is a lot of fun. I can't believe, by the way, how fast the first hour went. That was like one of the fastest hours on record for us.
Yeah, I hear you. It went by really, really fast. There's the very end part. I'm going to kind of shift the conversation to the very end part of this 70-year-old prophecy here. And I'm just going to read this last little short paragraph. Under the earth, something extraordinary is preparing itself. A revolution that is grandiose and completely inconceivable will manifest itself soon in nature. God has decided to redress the earth, and he will do it. And it is the end of an epoch. A new order will substitute the old, an order which love will reign on the earth. The part that interests me is under the earth, something extraordinary is preparing itself. What are your thoughts on that statement?
That, again, goes right back to plasma energy and the energies, the creative energies of reality. It also reminds me of something you and I discussed within the last few days. We happened to listen to Cliff High, the Webbot guy. So a lot of people will recognize his name. He was talking about the plasma in the middle of the earth and how it interacts with the cosmic energies. We're, not to get into the whole science or different information about it, but the basis of it is that it's not even possible for the center of the earth to be liquid metal, because liquid metal will not hold a magnetic field. He said that anybody in mainstream that knows anything knows that it's a plasma center of this Earth. And what that means is the energies that literally come from the galaxy, the cosmos, all of these different frequencies that are coming from different planets, different universes for that matter, different dimensions without any doubt, hit the plasma center of our Earth and then are turned into information. And that information manifests in different ways. It manifests in physical reality. Because literally there's information within the signals encoded on beyond quantum level. We're talking about the very fabric of reality itself. I mean, it's so utterly impossible for any of us to really wrap our heads around creation of all that is. I mean, that's beyond any of us, I think. But to look at it in a more, fine scale, we're talking about how things actually work, the science of creation. So when we're talking about what you're just talking about with the Earth, something manifesting itself soon in nature, well, I think this is what we're seeing if we take that thread through of different prophecies, different stories, from Bible to prophecies to ancient stories to all of these different things, and we take that thread through, well, they all have a common integer of Earth changes. Because I think that's something that goes for, constant. Everything is always changing. But the fact is, what you're talking about with the volcanoes on the Hawaiian Islands, there you go. It's the constant changes. You mentioned earlier in the week about gray matter related to this plasma energy and how it works to manifest physical form. Did you want to explain a little bit about that, Rebecca?
Well, first I want to get back to the magnetic field, and then we'll get into that because I want to kind of keep this on task. There's a piece of information that just came out. I have no idea how old it is. It could be a couple years old, but it can't be much older than that. But they talk about the magnetic field around Earth and how, that, obviously it assists us, but because our instrumentation is getting, more sophisticated, science and technology is getting more sophisticated, they've now found a second source on this planet of magnetic vibrations. So there's a double layer, if you will, of, we'll call it protection. Okay, that surrounds, comes from inside and goes outside the Earth, right? I mean, and magnetic fields are important. So now I'm going to veer off here for just a minute, so everybody hang with me. There is a channel that I listen to. As a matter of fact, I hosted him a couple times in Kansas City. He's also been on my show once. And his name is Lee Carroll, and he channels a being called Cryon, the Magnetic Master. And I used to think it was kind of interesting because he came out in the 80s. And I used to think it was kind of interesting. I was like, even back then, even when I didn't really understand as much as I do now, I thought, well, now it's interesting, magnetic. There must be something going on with the magnetics of this planet because that's what he calls himself, as a magnetic master, right? Cryon. And so here we are talking about magnetics, plasma, and how this energy is being kind of tapped into, and as this cosmic ray, or whatever you want to call it, the wave, this new wave, whatever it is, however we want to say it, what he called it, cosmic electricity, is a wave of cosmic electricity is what he called it. I think it's just interesting that there's got to be a correlation as to why this being called Cryon decided to show himself on this planet during this time, came forward, and then with all the other information, such as Cliff High's information, as well as information from other sources, many other sources. I don't want to deny that the right for other people to be understood and heard either in regards to that. There's a lot of people that are talking about that. So lots of information there, and I think if as an individual, if you sit down and you figure out your own magnetic field, because we all have that. We all have a little bit of magnetics in us. We'd have to, right? We just have to, because we got the same stuff as everything else has in it. just smaller amounts. It's not as prominent. But I think if we sat down and studied that, and I think if you study that, because there's people that I've actually assisted with health issues and stuff, that magnetics was their kind of assistance in helping them to get rid of whatever the malady was that they were at the time having difficulty with. So it's interesting to watch what's happening with the magnetics and this plasma energy. I think it's just absolutely fabulous. Now, back to the gray matter. Gray matter is what did they say, CERN? CERN, that's what it's actually trying to create, but it's doing some really bad stuff. So gray matter is, comes in its form naturally, and then CERN is producing it artificially. They just don't know what they're doing. And even when the first time I even heard the word CERN, I still cringe over it. I just cry on of magnetic service. That's exactly right. I love him, by the way. He's wonderful. Yes. I'm sorry, I'm reading Ray again. He said, it's just a feeling, a big wave is waking for all. Yes, and it's coming. Yes, it is, and so are we. It's growing, and so are we. Absolutely. I agree we're growing. But back to the gray matter. How much of this do you want me to go into?
Well, it's so important because really what we're talking about is manifestation from energy to something physical. And very few of us ever think of even what creates the physical things and how it's created through the science of reality. I mean, we're so used to the trees sitting there and the earth that we walk on that we never think of its creation. We're told things like, it's stardust, we're all made from the same stuff, and quite honestly, we are, but there's so much more to it. So when we take energy to manifestation of something physical, we can sort of take that one step further, and we have to understand it's more than just the physical. It's the emotional, psychological, and spiritual and mental planes of reality. So they interweave to form everything that we experience. So to give some understanding on how physical manifestation occurs, we have to understand that it goes into all of the things that he was talking about within this prophecy too, about the changes and the fire being, purifying and all of these things. We're all talking about the same thing, honestly. I'm just trying to sort of connect it to how it all works within the prophecy and semantics again.
Right, and that's exactly what I think that purification and the fire, some of it is, that we're talking about an energy and an energy that, when you talk about plasma, it can burn like fire, but it's not. Mm-hmm. Right? It can burn like fire, but it isn't fire. And not even when we understand it. Yeah.
Even when it's referring to different energies that will be suitable for some individuals and not suitable for others, depending on what their so-called frequency or vibration is. I mean, that right there sounds so woo-woo, but if you think of it in sort of realistic terms, for example, an X-ray, I don't know, let's think of some energies. Just say for an X-ray, for example. An X-ray probably isn't going to hurt plastic or a rock, but it certainly damages living biological cells. We know that for a fact. So depending on your quote-unquote vibration, it could be good or bad. It can be positive or negative. So, I mean, energies, it's how they work. It's the science of it. So again, taking that as an example from what so many of us would perceive as woo-woo, right back to the basics and saying, look, yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely makes sense. And I, when we talk about the terms frequency and vibration, unfortunately, it's something you're really, really going to have to get over because it's going to be here for a few minutes. Anyway, I'm just saying.
Am I stuck? Am I fixating on that word?
Yes, you are. You're fixating on it. Like, oh my God, I got to get it out of my, repertoire here of words that I use, right?
I warned you earlier. It triggers me.
Well, and perhaps it's because you have a different word for it and words for those terms and you just don't remember it yet. So, and which, let's talk about that, in the prophecy. I want to move back into the prophecy for a minute and talk about the karma thing. Mm-hmm. And the fact that these, I in that prophecy somewhere, I got the distinct impression he was also talking about the people coming in with full memories of who they were.
Yes.
I think he mentioned that. I think that
yes.
specifically. And I think that's really fascinating. I have for years, I teach people how I take them through guided, meditations, guided visualizations into past lives, what we call past lives. That's just the linear way of looking at it, for timelines, different timelines that we've all been on. And I give people a recording of that, because then they can go back and they can follow the first part of it, and it can take them to any other life cycle that they wish to pop into for information. But for me, what I found was after my first kind of spontaneous is what happened with me past life, I realized that when I'm certain places, and here's the word I'm going to use that you've used all night, I'm triggered. I'm triggered into some kind of a memory recall that pops in for that situation, right? It happened when I was over in Egypt quite a few times. And I didn't have any kind of those recalls prior to going.
Yeah.
I didn't have any of that. Now, it's not to say that I was some known individual in Egypt, because I wasn't. It wasn't like I was some, pharaoh or priestess or something like that. I mean, I just wasn't known like that. But that didn't negate the experiences that I had there and the influence that it had on me, as well as Atlantis and Lemuria. I still have this one specific memory, and it may be Mu instead of Lemuria, and we'll talk about that at a later time. But I think it's fascinating that more and more people are able to access that. Some people call it the Akash, or the Akashic records, and that is actually, in a sense, what it is. If you go in and you pull out where you used to be, that's something that you have actually experienced or witnessed or been a part of on some level, and it is a part of your memory banks, and we carry everything that we've ever been or experienced within our genetic coding, individually speaking. That's what makes us all unique, because none of us have had the same identical experiences through the, God only knows how many billions of years we've actually been here, or millions of years that we've come into existence. Our souls have, right? I don't know that there's such a thing as a timeline for that. I don't know that we can get that specific, at least not from this dimensional space. If, maybe when we reach 9th or 10th level, we might be able to, but at this point I don't have any specifics on how long we've actually been here, right? Or been as a soul, spirit, if it were. So this idea that this new energy is allowing for people to come in, and I've heard a lot of stories recently, over the last probably 2 years, where there's a lot of these little stories, and once I'm really terrible. I should start marking them and saving them, but I just don't. But all these different people that have come in, young children that have come in, and they have full recall of where they used to be. Yeah. And who they used to be, and what they used to do, and who did what, and he knew Uncle Bob is blah, 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 I mean, it's just fascinating to me, the level of awareness that some of these kids come in with. And some adults are all of a sudden here's a word again, triggered, and then all of a sudden their floodgates open up. And then they have almost full recall of many different situations. Not every single life cycle. I wouldn't imagine your little brain could probably process all of that at once. But just saying, the computer is kind of limited in this physical form, just saying. Mm-hmm. And the computer being the brain, right? It's the thing that sends the little synopsis to everything, tells it what to do. So it's really nothing more than just for me, it's nothing more than just a computer, what the brain is. It's a very elaborate biological computer, but a computer nonetheless, which you can retrain. You put in a different program and run something entirely different. So it's kind of fascinating. So that being said, I don't know about the rest of you out there, if you have been experiencing, any kind of, I'm going to say noticed any different perceptions, if you found that you have different abilities than what you did before. I can tell you that as of recently, and I think Tobias can attest to this, for myself personally, I've had quite a few experiences here in the last few months that has just popped open the lid, so to speak, and things are just going like crazy. And physical manifestations, healed myself, helped others, healed others. It's been amazing. It's been an amazing journey. Yeah.
And awareness of different things. I mean, there's always been a certain level of awareness there, but at the same time, there's new avenues of awareness opening. And I see this with quite a few people. I see this with different people that I work with and friends and students, et cetera. And it's really a positive thing to see really happening, because there's been so much talk for so long. Well, there's all of these things are changing and the energies are opening the consciousness of people. And here we are. And, honestly, I mean, for so long, I totally poo-pooed that because I saw so many other things that just didn't reflect that. However, we have to really, really grab at these things because they're in our face now. So at least it's happening on some levels, and I have no doubt that it will continue to happen, with all of the information that we've gleaned from different places.
I agree. And one of the things that I want to get into a little bit tonight, and we'll talk a little bit more about this prophecy, because I'm just mesmerized by it, just because of because of the verbiage and the semantics that's being used. The pictures. I tell people I don't actually hear what you say, I see what you say. The same thing goes for when I read something. When I read something, the picture forms. Instead of reading the words, it like tells a story in picture form. Everything's in pictures for me. Makes it kind of challenging in some cases, when I was going to school, but nonetheless. So, as I was reading this, and some of the pictures that came forward in it was quite fascinating on the semantics of what actually showed up as I was reading it. So I don't know if it's being converted into a more modern metaphor, so to speak, for me, or if that's actually what it means. It's just kind of interesting. But Tobias and I have been working with some Arcturians, which has been extremely fascinating. They came in a few weeks ago. And they've always been around, and I'm going to get more into that as time goes on. But I've actually been able to bring forth one of the Arcturians that has spoken with Tobias on several occasions. I think we're 3 or 4 or 5 hours worth of channeled information that's come through already, and there's tons more. It's pretty fascinating stuff, and it speaks to this prophecy. It also speaks to these new energies and instant manifestation. It talks about, they talk about the plasma, they talk about gray matter, they talk about this new wave, they talk about all of this. It's pretty fascinating stuff, who they are, and working with the Pleiadians. So, my doorway's opened up, my world is opened up, a great deal, by just having them come and sit, and conversations that we've been having over the past few weeks has just been absolutely phenomenal. And I will be bringing those forward, by the way. Those will be available on video, or for replay, once, we get them all done. And I will be putting them up, and we'll give you some information. So again, if you haven't signed up for my Twitter or Facebook or my newsletter, or sign up for one or the other, or all of them, or the YouTube, because they'll all be available there, and you'll get notification of when they're going to be ready. So, absolutely. So, anything else that you want to say on that before we move off that topic?
Well, part of what's so fascinating about the Arcturians and everything that's been happening in that regard for a few weeks now is that there's these coincidences that fall into place. So it seems like so many common threads have been happening when it comes to energy. from plasma to chi energy to crop circles to the subconscious interface operation, which is the quantum I use, to plasma generators from several different sources, all culminated in a 7-day period. To Cliff High and that recording that we watched him do relating to the plasma at the center of the earth, et cetera, as we talked about. I mean, it all just fell into place. And then what happened after that? Well, you brought up a connection to this prophecy, and it's talking about the same things. It's so fascinating to see these trends, because if that's not in your face, I don't know what is. So it certainly is worth every minute that we sort of delve into it deeper and try to unravel it and see what it means. And not only what it means, but what we can do with it, right? Because that's the ultimate goal, what we can do with it.
Yeah, do with the information, for sure. So let's talk about the Cliff High in his thing talks about in his report that he did, or well, it was actually an interview that he was on. Talked about that the interior of the earth is not filled with molten lava like our scientists have been telling us all these years, or whoever it is has been telling us that because of the fact that it doesn't have magnetics, you can't draw magnetics out of molten lava. That the center of the earth is actually filled with a plasma energy. And so you have to think about that. And so for those folks out there that are listening to this, that are still with us, that's a lifelong thing we've been told, is that the core of this earth is molten lava. That's what it is. And so for that to be replaced with the idea, the understanding that it's not molten lava, I'm sure there's going to be some people that they probably believe the earth is flat as well. I don't know. I don't know. And I'm certainly not putting anyone down. Please don't misunderstand me. But it is a lot to take in. I mean, something that you have known that's what they teach you from the time that they teach that kind of stuff in school, grade school on up. The earth is molten lava on the inside. Now all of a sudden we're being told, no, it isn't. So I'm not sure how people are going to react to that. However, if people are really paying attention, and if they're really thinking about this logically, it doesn't make sense, even though I have no physical proof, and you don't have any physical proof, that the inside of the earth is actually plasma energy and not lava. But it makes sense based on the science behind it.
And which expert is saying it, because they've got different stories. So we have to take our armchair quarterback sort of expertise, which is null to zero. And we have to discern, there's another great word, we have to discern for ourselves what makes sense. And you know what? We have the ability to make sense for ourselves. That's such a big issue that we have to remind ourselves. We have the ability to figure things out for ourselves given the right stimuli and information. So absolutely, let's not just take what we're being told ever. Let's not do it.
And unfortunately, when you're in school, when you're in regular public schools, you can't question.
Oh, no.
Because you have to pass the test. And if you don't agree with what they're telling you, and you're not learning what they're telling you to learn, then you're not going to answer the questions right, and you're not going to be able to pass in your school. So it's an indoctrination, and I don't want to get into that, because that takes me down a rabbit hole there. That's not a pleasant place for people to be with me. Just saying.
Well, exactly. And ultimately, all of this information, because it's coming from so many different directions, all of the time, even unseen directions, as we've talked about through the energy fields and the sciences that most people really don't even contemplate, we're getting a barrage of information. So, and then add to that the internet, add to that all of the other stimuli full of information. It's blasting into our heads and our energy fields constantly, which gives even more reason to grow our ability to be healthy and watch our diets and all of this stuff to really be able to use our own senses, because there's so much BS out there within the information. To be able to use our own senses is part of what health really stands for. So Definitely. It's a big deal to me. It's always coming back to the facts. With all of this information, how are we supposed to know what's real? Well, we know what's real by being healthy and being able to use our extra sort of sensory perceptions to figure it out for ourselves.
Absolutely. And there is another point here. I'm going to kind of segue out of that into another one. And I'm going to read just this little part of it here. Mm-hmm. A new culture will see the light of day. It will rest upon three principal foundations: the elevation of woman, the elevation of the meek and humble, and the protection of the rights of man. Okay. So for the last probably 15 years or so, there's been a huge movement of bringing back the divine feminine. And that movement is going strong. It's not as talked about as it used to be, but that doesn't mean it's still not going on, because I personally know of a lot of different groups where people are now talking about the goddess energy, and they're talking about the divine feminine, and the elevation of woman is putting us into the equal space with man. And I find that a really fascinating correlation as well. Now, the elevation of the meek and the humble. We've seen a lot of instances if for people that are, especially if you're Facebookers, right? If you like to go in there and read Facebook, there's a lot of posts about people, putting in arbitrary little videos of people just doing really nice things for other people, and they don't even know each other, right? Just these are people that you would consider humble and meek, and we're seeing them being praised or put into a limelight in a very positive way. And it always makes you feel good when you listen or when you watch something or you observe something that's happening that's just out of the kindness of somebody's heart or gratitude or what have you, whatever the case may be. So that's happening. And the protection of the rights of man. Well, for me, that what I see going on in the world today that's what all this chaos is about. That's what all these tribulations are about. That's what all this governmental stuff that we see in the news and all this junk going on, and it is junk, it really is, going on is really about the rights of man. That means humankind, not just men, but humankind. That will sort itself out. I truly believe that, because I believe that there are more and more good people that are willing to stand up to the bullies in the world and say, we're not taking that, and you can't do that to us anymore. And that gets back to me to the thing that struck me when I was reading it was the universal law. Interesting that he spoke about this being a prison planet, which it is, for many reasons. It's a prison planet. And it's a prison planet, and we were messed with. We've had conversations, and I've had guests on about this for years now, about what's happened to this world, this environment on Earth, that has imprisoned us. And one of the big things that always comes back is that there were those that broke a vow, or what's the word I want to use? Vow, I guess, is the best way of saying it, to leave us alone, that we weren't supposed to be messed with, and yet we were. So they broke something called a universal law. It wasn't man's law. It's universal law. And that's a law that protects all beings. Right? So that's in huge play right now, the protection of the rights of man. That is the big, big thing for me that's going on in our world today, as we're watching, kind of this battle, this war, if you will. And literally, it's a war for the saving of the human soul and the rights of man, as it would be related to this particular article. That's how I really feel about this.
It's so interesting, because it's even more beyond the laws of man. It's far beyond the laws of man. What it really comes down to is literally the spirit of justice, right? Mm-hmm. and it's such a deep topic. I remember, I shouldn't even bring this up because I can't even begin to describe it, but I remember a conversation I had several years ago with someone that lasted about 8 or 9 hours, right through a night, and it was about the spirit of the law, the spirit of justice, and it's a living, conscious organism. It's just absolutely fascinating. I wish I had recorded that, but unfortunately I did not. It's so deep.
Yes. The universal laws, and I believe that this planet eventually, especially after this cosmic wave comes through, because we have no idea what the effects of this is going to be. You know, it's like welcome to the new normal and hang on to your hat. You know, it's going to be a bumpy ride kind of a thing, right? Yeah. This is beyond my perception of bumpy ride. I mean, I couldn't have perceived this living through it at all. But I believe that once this event takes place and these changes start taking place, I believe that's what's going to happen to the complete solar system here. I'm going to speak just to the solar system, is that we're all going to get back into a universal law. We're going to do the right thing for the right reasons. And it's because we have to honor each other, honor ourselves, honor the planet. We have to honor those things. And many people are not doing that. I mean, I feel every time I throw away anything that's plastic, I'm going to tell you, I just freak out. Mm-hmm. I just absolutely I hate it because I know it's not good. I know it's harmful. But yet, you know, all of that's going to be taken care of, though. We will get to that point to where I truly believe we're going to get to that point to where there's going to be integrity in the products, not only that we consume, but what they're packaged in, so to speak, and that we're not going to be tearing down any more rainforest, and we're not going to be killing the orangutans, and we're not going to be going out trophy hunting lions and elephants, and we're not going to be doing that kind of stuff. We're not going to be gathering up dogs and you know, putting them for sale on the market, you know, as meat. You know, we're not going to do those things. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. It's not going to happen anymore. We're just not going to do it. And, you know, the more I think a person gets aware, the more conscious they become of their own habits and what they're contributing to the harm, or certainly not the benefit of not only the earth, but of themselves, because they're doing something they probably shouldn't be doing. That was absolutely pretty wrong there. I guess I shouldn't have went that far, but I did.
But it all makes sense. I mean, did you just pull a Tobias, Rebecca?
No, I did not.
But it makes total sense. It makes absolute sense. And that's why I love, you know, not to sound like I'm repeating myself, but that's why I love to talk about the quantum and how these energies really affect us. And because, I mean, it was, to be honest, to give you a true confession, it used to be really challenging for me to understand any discussion about energies coming in from, you know, the universe and all of this. It really baffled me. I thought it was kind of silly. I didn't really understand it at all. But coming from the bigger perspective of how these work and affect our thoughts, our actions, all of these things through the quantum field, brain waves, as we were alluding to earlier, it changes how you feel and think. It changes how you feel and think just on so many levels. So I can absolutely, completely understand the reality of, you know, these energies coming in. And in fact, that's a huge part of the topic that the Arcturians were talking about. I mean, I don't know if you remember much about that, Rebecca, but I blasted down into the conversation and questions. I really wanted to understand how these energies coming from this so-called central sun, how they affect, and it just went right back to the plasma and manifestation energies and the effects that we're all very familiar with of the types of healing and technologies that we use now ourselves.
Well, and I think it's a good reminder for all of us, regardless, that if we're not partaking in the exploration of it, we're doing ourselves a big disservice. We really are, because I mean that we're speaking to the energies that are coming in. Just as this prophecy and all the others and what's been told to us repeatedly over and over. You pick up most of these books, you know, all of them they've prophesized this time coming. And you know, we've got people out there talking about it, all kinds of people talking about it from all walks and genres of being. Talking about this wave of energy that's here. We have to avail ourselves of it. We have to recognize it. We have to learn how to work with it. And that's been my biggest challenge, is learning how to work with this new energy, because it does not follow the traditional way that I was used to working with energies. It's way different, way better, but way different. So I think people owe it to themselves to be able to really get into it and really avail themselves of working with it, understanding it, owning it, because all it can do is help.
Oh, and the worst thing any of us can do is to stop thinking and just take the status quo. We have to be able to think outside the box. You know, when it comes to anything that seems, uncomfortable to us or unknown to us, that's the best reason to go for it and look at it further, because it's outside that realm of what we've been taught or indoctrinated, as you were alluding to a little while ago. We need to think for ourselves. We need to experience for ourselves rather than simply be told what we feel, told what we should think, and told what truth and reality are, because we know that there's so much more about it. So, that's so big. It's a huge deal. We have to exercise our freedom to think. It's the biggest deal.
Absolutely. I think we've only got about 2 minutes left, maybe 2.5. So anything that you want to wrap up, tell anybody about before I do my wrap up and share some information with people?
Well, just as you mentioned earlier, I'll just quickly say that we have recorded some hours of the Arcturian conversations, and these are not your average run-of-the-mill conversations. There's some real detail within them, and I think that everybody is going to look forward to partaking in some of this information. I really look forward to editing it and getting it out there, hopefully before I go away at the end of this week.
That would be wonderful. Okay, so let's see. I want to leave people with just a couple of little phrases, sentences here from this 70-year-old prophecy. The light, the good, and justice will triumph. It's just a question of time. That's what's happening. That's what's going to happen. That's what's going to go on. And we have to hang on to that, because this is the new age. We are entering into it. We've been entering into it for a while. And obviously whenever there's change, it disrupts the status quo, and there's a lot that don't want that interrupted. But unfortunately for them, it will be. Unfortunate for us that it will be. For those that are not wanting to be servants anymore, and most of humanity would agree with that. I do wish each and every one of you really a wonderful exploration of this material and other people's materials, because you owe it to yourself. Again, if you want a copy of it, it's journeyswithrebecca@yahoo.com. Article in the subject line, I'd be happy to send it to you. Look for the announcement of the channelings as well as the online classes that will be on demand, so you can pick it up at any time. So I'll be doing that as well. Don't forget, copy of my book is available at Amazon.com. The links are on my website. Please sign up for the Twitter, the YouTube, so that you can get all the latest shows and you can see what else has been posted. There's a lot from 2015 and forward. The 2014 and later, or earlier ones than that, are all still on my website, and those will remain there for quite a while. So until then, it's a good day, and I wish each and every one of you a really wonderful evening. So until we meet again, where will your life's journey lead you? Many blessings, everyone. Good night. Tobias, good night. Thank you, JP. Good night, sweetie.